Welcome again, everyone, to today's episode of Resilient Health Radio. I'm your host, Dr. Darin Ingalls, and I'm really excited about the podcast today because we're going to talk about something we've never done on the podcast. And my guest today is Christine Cimabue. She is a licensed contractor, actually not far up the road from me in Huntington Beach, California, but an expert in building a house that's safe and healthy and free of mold. But I know you also consult with a lot of people who are going through mold remediation and trying to figure out the best way to salvage their home. And I know this has just become such a huge problem for so many people. So I'm just so thrilled to have you on the podcast today. So welcome, Christine.
Thank you so much. I'm really excited to talk about this important issue and really just how big of a role our homes play in our health. And I'm sure you see that quite a bit.
Yeah, it's interesting. I lived in Connecticut for almost 20 years where everything was built in, the 1700s, 1800s. You kind of expect mold problems in these very old homes that over some course of time, there was water intrusion, some sort of mold damage. But I swear I've had more problems out here in Southern California with people than I ever had living out on the East Coast. And I have my own theories, and I'm sure you can speak as an expert on this, but it seems like a lot of the construction, particularly in Southern California, they build these big tract homes. It's all about speed, get the whole thing up and running and sellable as fast as possible. And so I don't know if it's just contractors, i.e. plumbers taking shortcuts just to get the job done. And then inevitably people get a little bit of a leak. If it has more to do with the seals and the windows, but it seems like every time it rains, which isn't that often in California, my patients call and complain, we've got water coming in through the windows, coming through the roof. It's like everything leaks like a sieve when we do get moisture. But, what are your thoughts? What is it about construction these days that these houses seem to be a bit more prone to water damage?
I see that too. And I'll be curious to hear what your theory is as to why. And there seems to be this big debate in home building amongst homeowners of should your home be airtight or should it be quote unquote leaky? Which one is best? Which one is healthier? And due to energy efficiency code requirements over the years, particularly in the last 20 years, there's been some heavy regulation in this driver to build tighter.
Yeah.
And the driver is not because of indoor air quality, it's because of energy efficiency. But really, the truth is, just like our bodies, we don't breathe through our skin. We have a really nice centralized intake that filters our air and brings in fresh air. It is true that our homes should be functioning in a very similar way. And so, although our climate is pretty mild here, if you take what is a leaky home and you stick it in humid Texas, well, now this leaky home is bringing in humid air through its skin, through its walls, and that is not a good thing. So, what's really led to just this prevalence of building defects and water intrusion is that homes are being built tighter, so they're not breathing through the walls anymore, but this centralized intake of fresh air is not sufficient. So it's not been going well building these tighter homes and not having a mechanical system, all of our heating and cooling, that is meeting the indoor air quality needs.
Yeah, I wonder if having these leaky homes actually was a good thing. I lived in a house in Connecticut that was built in the 1940s and never ever had an issue with water intrusion. But I do recall, I had a basement and an attic, but there was ventilation everywhere, so it's almost like if there was water, it would dry out fairly quickly and not necessarily lead to a mold problem. And maybe in the effort, again, to be more energy efficient and having these tighter homes, when there is water intrusion, again, you're not getting that airflow through the walls, through the attic, through the crawl space or whatever it is, enough that it dries that moisture out, and then it just becomes a bigger mold problem. So that seems to be
Yeah.
what I think's going on.
It's true. It's true. So as we're getting tighter, older homes, they had no insulation at all. And there was just air moving in and out through those walls all the time. So yes, when there was water in those walls, it had the ability to dry out. But there is a way to build an airtight home that is going to be able to dry out. It's just that when homes are built or renovated according to building code, unfortunately, that is so often taken as the gold standard when really it's the bare minimum standard that a home can safely be built to without it falling down. So building a healthy home is going to require going above and beyond standard building codes.
Well, I know there's really two aspects to what you do, and I want to talk a little bit about both. I know you really specialize in new construction, building from ground up in a completely safe, hopefully mold-free home. But before we jump into that, can we just talk a little bit? Because I know this is where most people tuning in are probably at. It's like, yeah, I found out I've got mold in my home, and now what? Who do I call? Because I think most people are aware that the average general contractor out there knows very little about mold remediation, how to fix everything properly. What are some things that people should be thinking about in terms of hiring a contractor to do that work as they're looking to, try and salvage their home as it is?
Yeah, and the build back phase is so important. And talking with mold remediation companies and mold inspections, really, that whole process is so lengthy, but there's multiple changing of hands, right? It goes from the finding the right mold inspector that's going to do a thorough job that then passes it off to the remediation company, and then it feels like it just falls flat after that. And then, the contractor who's recommended by the friend or the family member comes in to do the rebuild. But there's really no standard that is set from start all the way through completion. And on the inspection side, I think it is just so darn critical that to make sure that the root cause must be addressed,
Right.
because without that and you rush into the build back stage, that can lead to unsuccessful remediation. So there really should be somebody involved throughout the entire process that is keeping the standard high, and really giving the green light to proceed to the next step. So yes, the inspection that's outlining the protocol for the remediation. Then the remediation takes place, and there should be a post-remediation inspection, giving that green light that you can actually build back. And on the build back side, it's going to be a big challenge to find a holistic minded contractor to do a build back of kitchen island or of a powder bathroom, right? These smaller areas. And sometimes they're done by handyman. So I really encourage homeowners to be the ones to set the expectation and the standards so that there can be a bit of quality control in the mix. So when it comes to the build back, really think about what had occurred. How did all of this come to be in the first place? If it was, in fact, mold situation in a bathroom that had, a leaky shower issue, very, very common, and there was water damage in the shower and it had to be completely ripped out and re-waterproofed. Well, think of in that build back of, are there safeguards that you as a homeowner want to have? And one of the very common ones that really is fairly inexpensive to do is if you encountered your second level shower had a leak, and then you notice, staining on the ceiling below or water came down below. Well, something that can be really effective to give you peace of mind in that build back is, instead of just putting drywall back in its place, put in an access panel. So if you have any second level bathrooms, put an access panel directly below where that drain is. So this would be an access panel in your first level ceiling, but that can be very inexpensive, but very effective so that you can have peace of mind to be able to go up there and investigate as part of the ongoing maintenance. So I'm a big fan of putting leak management strategies in place during the build back.
And during that build back phase, I mean, I've heard various stories from patients of mine where, the contractor came in, they didn't isolate the area where they're doing the build back, tearing out all the potential damaged material. I mean, how important is it that your contractor is, walling off in whatever way that area of remediation, fixing, so that you're not just spreading mold throughout the house?
That's right. It's so important, which really is why the inspection should be coming in first to set the protocol for the remediation. A general contractor, even being one myself, should never touch mold, should never treat the little bit of mold, should never, be in charge of doing anything with mold if they're not actually licensed to be doing that. And when it comes to the demolition and removing of it, that is technically a remediation. So I'm more of a fan of doing a thorough remediation and removing anything that can actually be removed that's not structural, instead of kind of going in this circle of remediation, whether botanical or chemicals, and then there's encapsulating. It's like all of these steps, when if we could just get the $4 piece of 2x4 out of the home and put a brand new one in, that sounds like the best path to go. But no, a contractor shouldn't be doing that. And a contractor really shouldn't be brought in until there is that green light to strictly just rebuild.
And is there special certification for contractors to say that they are qualified to do that mold remediation build back?
On the build back side, no. That's the scary part, is that's why there should be this emphasis on the inspection and remediation phase. And then there is that post remediation test, meaning remediation was a success in this area, and now you have the green light to build back. And so the person that's going to come in to build that back is likely just going to be a general contractor. And so it's going to be really important to set the expectation around materials. And unfortunately, for now, this is landing on the homeowner, because if you invite a contractor to come back and do the build back, they are very likely to use standard building materials or what they've been using for the past 20 or 25 years. And if you as a homeowner have expectations around maybe your chemical sensitivities or your mold sensitivities, you're really going to have to set the expectation for materials. And so in lighter cases where it's like a bathroom build back, that might feel really doable for a homeowner, but certainly if it's an entire home, it gets pretty cumbersome, which is why we jump into the mix. But to give some like practical things that you can do as a homeowner if you're doing a lighter build back, is really to look at robust building materials that have the ability to handle moisture. That's a good kind of baseline start. And because bathrooms are so prevalent in the mold remediation and build back space, think of building back the bathroom as a wet room.
Yeah.
So, I see a lot of beautiful wallpaper or wicker baskets or wood vanities, and they're beautiful, but if you are going through mold remediation, the last thing you want to do is ever go through one again. And so think of your bathroom as an area that can handle moisture and high levels of humidity every single day. One of my favorite building materials to use in a bathroom is the entire elimination of paper face drywall.
Yeah.
So drywall that you see at Home Depot should be completely avoided, never used in any bathroom. And there are more robust materials. Uh, One is like a fiberglass backed drywall. So same install methods, but instead of paper, it has fiberglass.
Yeah, I remember doing my bathroom in my house in Connecticut, and I remember them using, I think it was like a green board that was designed specifically for bathrooms. Is that the kind of thing material you're talking about, or is that something different?
Okay, let's talk about that one because as just as many of us have experienced so-called greenwashing in the industry of cleaners and all of that, there is very much greenwashing of the construction industry as well. And what that green board is paper-faced drywall,
Oh,
but it is sprayed with a fungal inhibitor. So it's still paper, but it's got a fungal inhibiting type of wax on it.
yeah.
It can still grow mold. It is still paper. So it is a code approved material to be used in wet areas, like behind a vanity, but it's still lacking in its like water resistant nature. So yeah, definitely recommend going towards something that can handle more moisture.
So for someone who might be looking to do like a new build, and I'm sure this is a 3 day seminar, but trying to build a mold-free home, what are some things that people, well, I guess the first step is no, again, how would someone even begin to find someone like you? Because I know there are building biologists out there that do some of this work, but I think it's a little bit different than just the straight construction side of things. How would someone go about, trying to find someone who really understands the depth of construction materials, mold-free home, design, all of that? Again, it just seems like there's so many different people that are usually involved in this process, from, architect to interior designer to contractor. How would someone go about even trying to like take that first step in building a healthy home?
Mm. It's an undertaking, that's for sure. But yeah, it's a commitment, and I think it takes a little bit of adjusting of what we've typically been told in building a home. You need an architect and you need a contractor. That's not quite going to get you there. Really, there needs to be layers of checks and balances. So, architect, great. They are responsible for generating the plans. Builder, great. They are responsible for executing those plans. But it's lacking in setting the expectation. So, it's very common for a builder to not have familiarity around building a robust, watertight home. And so bringing in a consultant who's going to layer in the material selections as well. Like priority number one is keeping the water out. How do we have a watertight roof, watertight exterior walls, foundation, all of that? So bringing in a consultant to set that expectation for the entire project. And something we are adamant about layering in every project we're involved with, all over the US, is every project must have third-party verification. That is not required by building code. Typically, what you get is your local city inspector who shows up for about 30 minutes. But layering in third-party verification is so critical. And I often get asked, well, what does a contractor think about that? And again, my response is shift your perspective. You are the homeowner who is likely paying $1 million+ to build a new home. You should not be afraid to let the contractor know that there will be third-party verification. It's a very big undertaking, but I am of the mindset that really everyone is proven guilty until innocent. We need to know that in fact windows are not leaking, and it's not to say this is all contractor negligence. It's matter of fact that there's just human error. That is just a part of life. And when you are building a home that has 30+ windows, it's very likely that one of those may have been installed slightly incorrectly, and could be letting water in. So every window of every newly built home or renovated home should have third-party leak testing. And that is simply just so that you as a homeowner can have peace of mind. You can sleep well at night, not laying there thinking if any of the windows are leaking. But leak testing of the exterior is something that anyone can do, whether you're living in your home right now, not going through a mold remediation, and just might have concerns if the windows could be leaking. That is something that anyone could do, renovation, new build, or happily living in their home. And I'm a big fan of that.
Yeah, it's interesting being on the East Coast where most people had basements, and then out here in California where basements don't exist because we have these things called earthquakes, but every house is pretty much built on a slab, more or less. Do you see more
Mhm.
problems in homes that are built on a slab or maybe even a crawl space relative to those that have basements? Does the basement provide
Mm.
any extra kind of protection? Because I see, these houses in California that don't have gutters. So again, the time it does rain, the water comes right off the edge of the roof, goes straight down. There's nothing at the base of the house to really provide any kind of water abatement, and it kind of pools, and it seems like it just kind of gets in where that slab meets the walls. So I don't know. What do you think about that?
Yeah, it's true. And, a lot of times people come to me and say, what's the best type of basement? And I really want to encourage everyone that any home can be built in a healthy way, even a basement, even a slab foundation. It's about the detailing that goes into it. And so you probably saw quite a lot of basements that had some level of water
Oh
intrusion.
yeah.
And there's studies about it that basically 98% of basements at some point in time will have water intrusion. And it goes back to the fact that they were built according to building code.
Yep.
They got the big thumbs up from that city inspector. But unfortunately, a basement built to building code requires one layer of damp proofing, basically one layer of waterproofing. And then you put all the soil back and, live in your home for the next 50 years. But nobody is stopping to make mention that that waterproofing really only lasts about 20, 25 years. It degrades over time. And if there's any cracks or settling in those basement walls, well, there's a nice path of travel for water to come in. And so that is a very prevalent issue still today, is that basements are not built for the most part with several layers of waterproofing safeguards, waterproofing, exterior insulation, dimple mats, and drainage, like all of these things that are required to really create a watertight basement. So a basement, yes, can be built in a healthy way, but only if it's going above and beyond building code. And same thing with slabs, just like you mentioned. Sometimes builders will take the shortcut and just have these gutters dumping water right up against the side of a slab foundation. Well, if that gutter's not connected to a drain that is moving all of that water away from the home, it's going to end up right at the foundation. And if they're, again, it's built just to building code around here, there's no vapor barrier between the soil and the concrete. So
Yeah.
that concrete is just going to suck that water right up. And there's a very big issue with mold on the backside of flooring, really here in a lot of areas, because there's no vapor barrier. And so that concrete moisture, where does it go? Well, it's going to go to the backside of the flooring.
Yeah, I've seen also just a lot of the sprinkler systems. They seem they're a little too close to the house. They're all spraying on the wall of the house and not really the plants. And they know that never got adjusted. But again, at least here in California, people generally water their plants every day because it's so hot and dry. And again, it seems like that's another contributing factor is just the bad installation of irrigation system.
Yeah, that's spot on. And it's another example of how this standard is not carried all the way through. Like if you are planning to build or renovate a home and you think that, the top priority is just finding that needle in a haystack contractor who really gets it, even if you were to find them, you still have to have quality control throughout the entire project. Sprinklers, that's very standard to have grass up against the side of the home on a side yard, or have all of this beautiful planting. Or the worst is really when, the architect is detailing these raised planters up against the side of a home, that shares a wall with an
Right.
exterior wall, and you've got this raised planter. Well, the job of that raised planter is to grow beautiful flowers and get watered every single day. So it is just adding so much moisture to the exterior of your home. So goal number one has got to be keep the moisture out, get any pop-up sprinklers away from the side of your home. There should be no planting, ideally, up against the side of our exteriors. And I'm not trying to be like a Debbie Downer. It's just, we've seen so many failures. You've heard of so many, contributing factors to mold in a home. And it's really about creating a robust, watertight home that families can actually heal and thrive in, and just be done with these building defects that just pop up all day, every day. Construction litigation is a huge deal. And it's just sadly still so prevalent, and an entire industry contributing to, making mold sick families well. And it starts with removing the source, right? Living in a home that doesn't have mold. And that means that we cannot have sprinklers watering our home.
Well, I'm glad you mentioned earlier about testing after the build back, because I'm always shocked the number of people who go through very expensive mold remediation. I said, oh yeah, what did your follow-up test show? Oh well, they didn't do it. They just said everything's fine. Well, based on what? I mean, it's because they told you so. I mean, I
Mhm.
certainly wouldn't trust any contractor's word that they did a proper job. And again, not that they're doing anything nefarious. It just may be that maybe there's an area that they weren't aware of that didn't get remediated, and they took care of what they knew of based on a mold inspection, but perhaps there's another area that didn't. So unless you kind of do that follow-up testing, you don't really know for sure. And again, for the people who have done it, again, I've also been amazed the number of people that did find out they still had a problem after they thought everything was taken care of. So I know it gets to be horribly complicated.
It is, and it can feel really defeating. And we've probably both heard some really devastating stories of costly six-figure plus remediations that weren't successful. And I really want to help prevent anyone from having to go through that, because it tears families apart, and it's just so sad to really see. And I think it can be avoided. And so go in with the lens of implementing safeguards, access panels, leak management. We should be building homes that can handle moisture, and that if the washing machine overflows, it doesn't cause, destruction and lead to having to completely rip out the entire laundry room. Or, building with particle board in so many of these homes. So safeguards, whole home leak detecting devices. I mean, there's so many great things out there to add in layers of protection that I'm a big fan of starting there. It's almost like all of our homes are these cars with no dashboard. We know nothing about our homes except for what the thermostat tells us.
Right.
And I just think that, it's not enough. And so the more insight and data that you can have about how your home is performing, the quicker you can respond. So a good example, whole home leak detecting device. Well, that's a great one. Same thing, that can be installed on any new construction, existing home. If you're going through a mold remediation, whole home leak detecting device, that's a great thing to add to any home. I wish I could be on the board of something that made it a requirement for all new construction homes, but we've got plumbing running through every wall, and we don't know what's going on with that plumbing. So that's another great fairly inexpensive tool that can be added and can monitor all of the plumbing in your home. I just want to help prevent people living in fear or the unknown in their homes and really feel more empowered and have data and safeguards in place, because it's devastating to go through a remediation.
Well, I know that you have a course. Can you tell us a little bit about the Holistic Home Blueprint?
Yeah, we came out with a course because our consulting firm does all new construction. So we are aimed at getting it right from the ground up. And so we work in a one-on-one capacity with architects and builders all over the US. But we know that that's not always the path for everyone. And so we do have a course that people can go through and, understand foundation all the way down to paint and make some more well-informed decisions about their renovation project. So that's something that we offer, and try to put out a lot of free information online, and get a good response in finally being able to stand up to your contractor and have educated conversations about what you want going into your home.
Wonderful. And do you consult then with people directly?
We do. We do. We've shifted over the years into what we found to be the most successful format, and that is heavy collaboration directly with architects and contractors and the homeowner. And our vision is to really take what, your expectation is come move-in day and work backwards from there, communicate that to the entire team, and layer in those checks and balances. And it can be really successful when all expectations are communicated ahead of time. All right, understandably, can feel very frustrating for a homeowner and for a contractor if we just show up, during framing or during drywall and say, all right, we're going to shake things up here and totally change the current game plan. So earlier, the better, getting into the details of the plans. But yes, heavy in the team collaboration approach.
Wonderful. And I also understand you have a book coming out next year.
We do. Yeah, that is something I'm very excited about. Just again, I just want people to have a tool, because I find this prevalence of homeowners feeling like, well, I'm not a contractor, so I don't know what to say. My contractor's been doing this for 30 years and he's making me feel like he knows more than I do. But homeowners know more about what their family needs from a health perspective. And so bridging that gap so that homeowners can have really well-informed conversations with their team and actually say, you know what, actually here in my home, I'm not going to do spray foam. And this is X, Y, and Z. And here's some other strategies that we can talk through, because there are some permanent decisions in home building and got to have informed consent all across the board. And so, yes, the goal of the book coming out next year is to really empower homeowners to have thorough conversations.
Wonderful. Well, I look forward to seeing that coming out. And we're going to drop the links to your website, to your course. So for people who want access to that, that will be available in the show notes. And then, yeah, we'll look forward to seeing that book. Do you know when it drops next year?
We're still working on it.
Okay.
So my goal is by the middle of next year that it should be done and out and ready.
Perfect. Great. Well, I really appreciate you spending time with us. I know this is such a huge, important area for so many people, and mold is just such a major trigger for so many chronic health issues that, again, it's so hard from my side, to deal with the medical part when they're constantly living in toxic soup. And I know people, again, are working so hard to try and make their home a safe space for the whole family. And like I said, it can just be a very challenging thing. But I know that you've got so many great tools to help people navigate this and make sure they get the construction right, make sure they're using the right materials. So I hope people tuning in will really take advantage of the free resources you have and your course to get better educated on to help protect their family in every way. So again, I appreciate you spending time with us on the podcast today.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.